Ava Hyden has a blog on people and beauty. The first thing I want to start out with is a reflection of the class writing and critical inquiry as a whole. The first thing that I learned is that the subject matter of beauty has many different subtopics, whether it be art, people, or music, and that everyone's opinion on these topics will vary. I believe that this is due to the fact that we use beauty a lot in a lot of different ways throughout the daily use of it, and it has kind of muddled its meaning. And I also believe that this is because we think that ugly is the opposite of beautiful, which we've kind of noticed that it's not necessarily the opposite of beautiful, that there's probably more to something being beautiful than there is to being ugly. I think this came up in our conversation about the show Ugly Betty, as you can see at the top. That is the actor on the right, and then on the left is her when she's filming, which you can clearly see is totally different, and that she's probably not an ugly person, it's just society's standard of ugly versus beautiful, how they perceive it. One thing that I really learned is that you do not always realize what you automatically think, meaning that you can look at something and be like, wow, that's beautiful, but why is it beautiful and why did you initially think that? A conversation that reminded me of this was when we talked about Barbies and what kind of child would choose what kind of Barbie and how they grew up and how that affected it. That really stuck out to me because wealthier kids tend to choose white Barbie dolls when people from middle age, like middle class households would choose more ethnic Barbie dolls, which I just think is kind of funny and not correct in a way, almost. One thing that really stood out to me is that knowing how to write is very important due to the fact that it just develops the culture that you're in. And a big part of the writing process is actually the research. I generally despise research because it takes forever and it's quite frustrating at times, but I've come to appreciate it because I've realized that the more you know, it doesn't make you a worse person, it just makes you better. So the more knowledge that you have, the better and more relevant your writing is, just because your opinion is more well-educated and well-rounded.
Okay, and now I'm gonna do a reflection on the class in general. So, when I first came to this class, and when we were talking about beauty, I was like, okay, beauty, people, that's pretty much it. Beauty is only about people. But when I went through this class, I realized that it's more about, it's broader than just people. There's photography, and there's art, and there's so many aspects to beauty. It's pretty much everywhere you look. One of my favorite things that we did was the questioning what is beauty, like about specific objects. And my favorite example is the banana duct taped to the wall because of how controversial it was and the emotions of rage or even just questioning why society is the way it is and what is art even. I thought that was very thought-provoking. Something that I thought about more at home was beauty's impact on gender. In the bottom left, you can see the show Keeping Up with the Kardashians. It's basically shown right there, they're just women standing there. That's basically the show. And it made me think, if a group of guys tried to make a show where they just stood around looking nice, it wouldn't be successful. But because it's ladies and women's value is more in how they look, whereas guys, it's more of what they do. The show is successful because they look nice. This class in general taught me to think deeper about topics. So before I took this class, I thought that plastic surgery was one thing, and then I realized it's a bunch of other subtopics. So there's more to things than just the surface level. As for writing itself, I learned some sort of formula for writing that is pretty foolproof. What you do is you take your general information, so you do your research, and you narrow it down to a summary of what your point is, so then the reader can understand what you're trying to say. Use specific information like statistics so that your information is more reliable. And personal information, for example, someone's life story, will make your presentation more heartfelt, and people are going to be more likely to believe your point. So all three of those things are important when you're writing.
My actual paper topic was on body image and how it affects athletic performance. Athletes who participate in individual sports like wrestling, gymnastics, ice skating, swimming are generally associated with poor body image and eating disorders in comparison to athletes who can participate in team sports like soccer or basketball, volleyball. And that is because they rely on themselves rather than a team, and they control their performance. And a big aspect of many eating disorders is a desire for control. Basically meaning if they wanted to improve their performance, finding control in something like an eating disorder would provide that aspect for them. However, the correlation that is made by many that individual athletes are more susceptible to eating disorders because of the issue of their sport is just uninformed, because there are so many more aspects to it, like pressure from coaches, performance standards, and media, which appear to have more of an influence than just what they participate in. One example is Caitlin Ohashi. She's on the bottom, well, that's both her, and she competed on UCLA's team in college. But before that, she was an Olympic hopeful and an elite gymnast at a young age. Her family moved to further her career, and basically she crumbled under the pressure that her coaches put on her to look a certain way, because they would say things like, "You look like you swallowed an elephant," or "You look like a bird that cannot fly." And as a result, she would just eat minimally, and she wouldn't make it through practices and wouldn't perform at her best. Her body stopped recovering, she had many injuries, and she basically hated what she was doing because it wasn't fun anymore. As a result, she stopped doing gymnastics for a while until she went back on UCLA's team in college. I find it ironic that the coaches encouraged her to stay lean and be like a lightweight, because it had more damaging results on her than it did benefits. So I think it's just funny that they would expect her to be like that when it didn't help at all. And the top picture is when she was young and she was training for the Olympics and getting ready to go at an older age. And the bottom is when she was on UCLA's team. She got many times on floors and a lot of recognition for that last year, so that's why she's recognized.
For my topic, I talked about plastic surgery and how it is not beautiful. Plastic surgery is advertised to increase self-esteem. That's like the main reason people get it, is because they believe it's going to fix their insides, make them feel better about themselves. And on an actual plastic surgeon's website, it is literally advertised to do that. But as a different plastic surgery said, the truth of the matter is that self-esteem doesn't come from a scalpel. In other words, changing the outside of someone is not going to fix their insides. People with mental issues suffer the most from that faulted representation of plastic surgery, because they get plastic surgery thinking, this is going to change my life, it's going to make me feel better, but in reality, only they can do that themselves. And there's two examples of this in the correlation between breast surgery and suicide. So women who go through breast surgery are more likely to commit suicide than those who do not. And 75% of people with BDD or body dysmorphic disorder actually have worse symptoms after. Body dysmorphic disorder is a disorder where one person is obsessed with one part of their body. And you think that that plastic surgery would fix that, but it makes it worse because it's drawing even more attention to that part of their body, and it will never be perfect. For my own argument, I argued that plastic surgery can lead to self-objectification, which is another reason why it's not great. And you might be wondering what self-objectification is, but if you break down the word, it's pretty simple. To objectify is to make an object or see yourself as an object, so self-objectification is viewing yourself as an object. I argue this because when someone drastically changes themselves, they're going to get a lot of attention. And that attention could be good, like a pat on the back or a thumbs up, but usually it's going to be pretty negative, like staring or catcalling. And that could lead the person who got the plastic surgery to believe that they are just an object, and that's all their worth is in how they look rather than their personality or their achievements. Overall, I don't believe plastic surgery is beautiful because it encourages people to change their outside, but changing the outside doesn't change the inside. It's not going to fix their self-esteem. Now we're going to look at our beautiful blog.
This is one of the articles that like Ava wrote, and it was basically just her reflection that she talked about. And I wrote a little bit more on writing changing people, but that's basically what I said as well.
Are there any questions?
Why did you guys choose your particular topics?
I chose my topic because I feel like it's important that people value like themselves and what they're capable of, and I just found it interesting that there's like more reasonings to things than you thought there would be. So I focused on a lot of like different individual sports that I just like mentioned, but I just found it intriguing that there's more behind the scenes than you think there is.
I chose plastic surgery because when I was looking for research materials, I looked first for books, and all of them were presenting plastic surgery in a positive light. So I thought it would be fun to try doing it in a negative light.
If like you knew someone had plastic surgery, do you think that would change how you view them?
Me personally,
Yeah.
I think it would. I wouldn't want it to, but that's kind of how it is.
Yeah.
You view them as, oh, they had low self-esteem, so it's kind of rough.
Yeah, no, it's rough.
So Ava was very specific about her academic argument and that keyword argument. I'm curious, what, I think I might have missed it, Cassidy, but what was your argument part? Because I know what you researched.
Yeah, my argument was that, actually I had it on the slide, that there's more. My thesis was about how you can't blame a sport for being what it is, and that the correlation between athletes in a certain sport is not necessarily like having an eating disorder or poor body image is not because of the sport itself, it's because of the pressures around it.
Okay. Very fair. One other question for both of you. What was the most interesting fact that you found through your research? Something, or the most interesting even opinion. What did somebody present that you were like, wow, that I never thought about that before?
For me, I found a lot of statistics on like how like the physical appearance has like changed throughout time. So I think it was in like 1960s, gymnasts were like 5 foot tall and weighed like 105 pounds, but like 10 years later they were like 4'8" and weighed 80 pounds, and I just thought it was interesting to watch how that changed over time.
For me, learning about body dysmorphic disorder, I thought that was really interesting because I'd never heard of that before. And there's a show called Botched, where it's basically people who suffer from that. They just get a bunch of plastic surgery.
Very cool. Did you watch any of the show?
Yeah, there was one episode where a guy was really obsessed with his nose and he kept making it smaller to the point of where if he got another surgery, it would turn black and shrivel.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting. Any other questions from classmates? Let's give these guys a round of applause.